Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is founder and chair of Educated We Stand, Jennifer Jenkins. Jennifer, thanks so much for coming back on.
Thanks for having me.
You and I have talked about education under the Trump administration in the past, and I want to touch base with you right now to see where you think they are. We passed the 100-day mark of President Trump's first 100 days in his second term. What has stuck out to you on where you think the administration's going when it comes to education in this country?
I think this administration is doing exactly what we've been seeing over the past couple of years by coordinated groups attempting to take over public education and inserting divisive political battles with extremism. They are doing everything they can to manufacture distractions and dissuade people from paying attention to the real issues. We're not talking about things that matter to our students and to our families, like teacher shortages or mental health crises with our students, our outdated school infrastructures, or recovering from literacy rates after the pandemic. All of that's being ignored. And I just believe that we're continuing to do this culture war distraction because they don't really actually care about improving education. They just care about creating fear and division.
So let's first talk about what is happening between K through 12. President Trump's administration ended $1 billion in mental health grants for schools. And this is what they said the reasoning was. They said this to News Nation, quote, "Under the deeply flawed priorities of the Biden administration, grant recipients used the funding to implement race-based actions like recruiting quotas in ways that have nothing to do with mental health and could hurt the very students the grants are supposed to help." What do you make of that action, and what do you make of that response?
I think this action is just pretty consistent with most of his behaviors. I think that most of Trump's administration attacks are not just an attack on education, attacks on funding for specific services like mental health. I just think that these are rollbacks of civil rights protections, just plain and simple. The executive order dealing with school discipline, that was intentional as well. This was something that was guidance to correct deeply documented racial disparity in school discipline. And Trump went to sought out and erase that as well.
Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, they were touting that school discipline executive order. Talk to us a little bit about that action and what you think it's really going to do.
I mean, just quite frankly, Black and brown students are still being punished more harshly than their white peers for the exact same behaviors. And that's what, the Obama era guidance was trying to correct and hold states accountable for. And the data is very, very clear. They are our students of color are being suspended and expelled at higher rates than white peers for the exact same offenses. And those offenses are often really subjective, like things like defiance or willful disobedience. These aren't egregious things that are being happening. And I can speak in my own district. For years, I pointed out the disparities and everyone just turned a blind eye. We had data that showed that when white peers did the same actions as our students of color, they did so at a higher rate. Yet 50% of our students in our alternative learning centers were Black and brown. I mean, the math never made sense. And every time I asked about that, the subject changed. So again, I don't think that this is anything different from the Trump administration. I think this is a rollback of civil rights protections. And quite frankly, it's dangerous because it's something that we've never even corrected in the first place.
I had a conversation with former Education Secretary Margaret Spellings, and she was concerned about the data that's coming out about test scores and education after the pandemic and beyond in these past 5 years. And the Education Department in the first few months of the Trump administration paused pandemic-era funding that would directly impact after-school programs, tutoring programs, and summer learning programs. I mean, what do you think are the implications there?
There's significant implications. I mean, again, it just shows that this administration doesn't prioritize what's best for our students. All we talk about are, the traditional culture war conversations. And if you really care about improving public education, if you think it's really not doing well, then stripping resources and funding away isn't the answer. And, my opinion is to intentionally to continue to deflate the amount of educators that we have in the system for our kids to destabilize our public education system. Not only are we ripping funding away, but on top of that, we're vilifying our teachers for doing their jobs, for teaching honest history, for supporting their students and creating inclusive environments. We're surveilling them. And already across this country have over 50,000 teacher vacancies nationwide. And so when students don't have teachers in front of the classroom, when access to programs and to resources are being stripped away, our students are losing their stability and their opportunity.
President Trump also signed an executive order surrounding AI and teaching AI in the classroom. Do you think that's a silver lining? What do you make of that?
It's hard to say that there's something negative about that. But again, I believe that it's political pandering. These are things that are already happening in our classrooms. But if the administration wants to focus on STEM education and increase resources, it's not something to be upset about, but to pretend that that's something that's going to be good for all of our kids is just foolish. And again, we need to be focusing on all of our students in these buildings, all of their interests, and making sure that there's a wide range of opportunities for all of our kids.
In the past few months, we've seen this battle between higher education and the Trump administration, and most recently, and probably most publicly, between Harvard and the Trump administration. And just this past week, they've upped the ante. The Trump administration said the university is ineligible for research grants, quote, until they demonstrate responsible management of the university. What are your thoughts on this fight between Harvard University, which is arguably the most elite, if not one of the most elite colleges in this country, versus the White House?
This isn't about Harvard. This is about dismantling trust in institutions that value academic freedom and value inclusion. The attacks that the Trump administration are doing on higher education are exactly what this broad right-wing agenda always does. It's trying to delegitimize our education system over issues like diversity and activism and institutional autonomies. Their goal isn't to reform anything. Their goal is to control it. They want to punish schools that have critical thinking and diversity on their campuses. And, this is an attack on First Amendment freedoms, but it's also an attack on our national interest. These are the best researchers we could have working on the most important health challenges that we have here. And taking away these critical funds for these researchers is really dangerous for this country.
What, aside from Harvard and itself, what are the long-term impacts of taking away these research grants? What does this do to the country? What exactly would the loss of that research mean for the rest of the United States?
It's critical. It will have a very, very dangerous impact on our national interests. These are researchers who are working on critical health challenges, things like cancer research. To take that away is just so dangerous and so foolish. And if they can do this to Harvard, they can do this to public education at every single level. They can do this from kindergarten to college. And so it's really important that these universities come together in solidarity and push back against these attacks, because our K through 12 students eventually go into these universities and they become those innovators and those researchers that we need to move forward and make progress and do better for the greater good.
Conservatives have argued that universities in this country for a while now are more of a left-leaning echo chamber. There are arguments that Harvard and other universities didn't do enough to combat anti-Semitism last year and beyond. And Linda McMahon said this on the federal grant freezes, that the federal government has a, quote, sacred responsibility to spend taxpayer dollars wisely, and that receiving such taxpayer funds is a privilege, not a right. What do you make of that argument?
I think it's really silly to say that colleges and universities are echo chambers for the left. I think what are we claiming that conservative students don't exist in this country? Conservative adults didn't go to college. It's just such a silly thing to say. But you did bring up a really good point. The rise in anti-Semitism globally and here in the United States, it's real and it's very, very concerning. And Jewish students across this country absolutely deserve to feel safe on campus. At the same time, though, universities like Harvard must protect those students' rights, but they also must protect the rights to protest and engage with difficult global issues, because we can and we must hold both of those as truths. We can stand firmly against hate, but we can also defend free speech for our students.
Where do you see education going? Because this has only happened in the first a little bit over 100 days now. We still have over 3.5 years of President Trump's second term. We didn't even get into President Trump signing an executive order to close the Department of Education. So what do you think? Where is education going in the next 4 years? What specifically are you looking out for next?
I can't even predict that. I think we're going to continue to see manufactured distractions. I think we're going to continue to see an increase in teacher shortages. We're going to see more mental health crises for our students. It's scary and it's dangerous. It's unpredictable, which makes it worse. I'm just going to continue to keep an eye on it and fight back as much as I possibly can.
And I think something that the data shows is that there is a mental health crisis amongst young people in this country. Test scores are worse now than they have been. I mean, do any of these actions actually address those types of problems that we're seeing in American education?
No, absolutely not. I mean, all of our kids are struggling. That's clear as day. And especially if you ask anyone who's working with our kids day in and day out, they'd be the first to tell you that that's true. We haven't seen any increase in mental health support for our kids. And quite frankly, the Trump administration, instead of doing such a thing like that, they believe that bringing more police into the classrooms is going to help serve some of the struggles and the trauma that our kids are facing on a daily basis. So no, I don't think we're doing anything about it.
Florida, which is where you're at, is the state that's really been at the forefront of this battle in education in the United States. I mean, on the ground there, what exactly are you seeing? I mean, what is the temperament like in the Sunshine State?
It's similar to what it's been, unfortunately, over the past 4 years. We have educators who are scared about making the wrong move in their jobs. We have teachers who are tired and frustrated because there are so many vacancies across campuses that they have to pick up the slack for those voids. We have families who are frustrated. They believe that their schools are already being disfunded and that they're seeing the effects of the expansion of the voucher program. $4 billion was spent last year expanding vouchers across the state of Florida, which has brought already significant impacts to local community public schools. There is this destabilizing feeling across this state when it comes to public education.
And since Governor DeSantis really put his sights on education, year over year, have you seen test scores increase? I mean, what does that data look like?
Yeah, very often you'll hear Governor DeSantis talk about Florida being number one in education. The reality is we are 50th in the nation for teacher pay. We are first in the country for the number of book bans. The size of our classrooms, student to teacher ratios are increasing. We're in the top in the country, which is an embarrassment. And our test scores fall year after year. Our SAT scores are falling year after year. So it's frustrating to hear this narrative that we're number one in education, but the reality is, and the data shows, that we aren't doing well, and the policies of DeSantis are not improving our academics.
President Trump has said on the campaign trail that education was going to be a big part of his second term. I'm curious, what do you think then is missing from this national dialogue and even this conversation right now between me and you when it comes to what President Trump in the past couple of months has done to education in this country?
A plan, progress, something that focuses on improving our public schools and improving the lives of our students. Simply just, broad-based policies that parents can choose where to send their kids isn't the answer if you're not providing them places that you think are doing well to send their kids to. And, ripping away resources to our most vulnerable children, our children with disabilities, our children who are low income, who are hungry. What is the plan for those kids? And I just hope that we continue to put pressure on this administration to articulate some kind of policy rather than continuously issuing executive orders that continues to ban and strip away resources.
Jennifer, I always appreciate our conversations. Thank you so much for your insight. And as we see the administration have more actions on education, I hope you can come back on and comment on them. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks for having me.